Millions of buyers are sitting on the real estate fence because they're waiting for the market to turn their way. But at the end of the day, you're ready to buy a house when you're ready to buy a house. When your walls are closing in on your growing family, or when the house is too big because your kids have moved out. When you're sick of paying someone else's mortgage, or when it's time to retire somewhere new. Buyers can't wait for a market shift. They need a clear path forward and wisdom from real people. That's where How to Buy comes in. You'll join me, Leo Ansoliaga, as we hear how to buy stories and advice from real buyers and the professionals who help them along the way in mortgage, real estate, insurance, financial planning, contracting, appraisal, and so much more. Now, let's jump in to today's episode. In this episode of How to Buy, I sit down with Matt Buchanan, certified financial planner and the leader of Buchanan Wealth, to talk about his journey from insurance to full-service financial planning and how he has built an incredible practice in our area. We get into what it takes to build real trust with clients and how high quality partnerships elevate the advice we give. We also touch on how to help clients stay grounded when uncertainty and fear starts to impact their choices. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, what a treat today to have not just a business partner, but truly a friend of mine on the podcast. Matt Buchanan with Buchanan Wealth is one of the top advisors and practices in the Northern Virginia area. Someone I not only care about, but respect a great deal. Matt, it's good to have you here today.
It's great to be here, and that's very kind. Appreciate those words.
Well, Matt, you and I obviously, have a lot of things in common, but we also have a lot of things that are not in common. You like to go out to the country and hunt your turkeys. I like to go to Whole Foods and buy mine, right?
That's right.
But there's definitely some common ground here in terms of finance, business, and we've had the pleasure over the years of unpacking all of that together. But before we get started and kind of talk about those similarities, maybe tell us a little bit about your story, right? Nobody wakes up on a Saturday morning and says, I'm going to be an advisor. I'm going to go and advise people on their finances. So maybe as we get started, unpack that for us a little bit today.
Yeah, certainly. No, I'd be glad to. Yeah, you're right. I didn't wake up with aspirations to be an advisor. What I did know is I definitely wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to run and build a business. And I coming out of college, I went to college down in Mississippi, played baseball down there. And coming out of college, that was just confirmed. I definitely still wanted that path. And so I came back home after graduation and started an insurance business and just began to build that business. And what I came to learn was I really did enjoy the engagement with the individuals, prospecting and kind of just earning trust and understanding needs. But what I quickly came to learn, particularly in that line, was that I was building this rapport and this trust, but I had a very limited offering. And once an insurance policy was in place, there really wasn't more I could do for those families that I wanted to do. And so that was kind of a natural progression into the more comprehensive financial planning space, because obviously insurance is just a piece of it, but it's a small piece of it. And there's a lot of other components at work. So it really just allowed me, that shift really allowed me to expand what I could do, but to work with people on an ongoing and long-term basis.
Yeah, I mean, and to piggyback on what you just said, I think, anybody, can grow a following, but very few people, grow a following in a practice that lasts. And the root of that obviously is tied to advice. It's tied to, being a fiduciary first, right, to your clients. So talk a little bit about your philosophy and just overall core values that you have. I mean, you've certainly, grown an incredible practice, but that was not by accident. it was by design. Can you maybe talk a little bit about those two items, Matt?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It was by design, and at times it was by redesign. But we've definitely come to a place where, yeah, we feel like we understand the good we can do and where we can help, and we understand, where we may or may not be a fit. And um, yeah, I think, I think first and foremost, I think understanding that the individuals that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, everybody's making big decisions. That's a reality largely of where we live. And a lot of times those decisions, they're not just big, they're very weighty. They feel maybe confusing. They feel in some cases overwhelming. And I think that, with our focus on planning, financial planning, we're able to come to the table and help bring some clarity there. And so we can just bring those clients into a clearer perspective of that decision. So they already know they have the decision. They just need clarity around what's the best path out of this, what feels heavy or weighty. And so that's really where we feel like we can add a lot of value there and help inform clients that way.
Yeah, and I think, I love this quote, and I've used it a couple of times on this podcast, right? But, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Mike Tyson said that, right? And I think what you're talking about is surrounding yourself with truly advisors, right? That can literally give you wisdom as you not only put the plan in place, but also execute on that plan, right? You serve a lot of clients that are, various walks of life, certainly people that value the advice. Now, do you bump into people that perhaps, can do this themselves? Absolutely. There's tons of them out there. But I think what you're saying is like, look, the people that really are the people that value what we do are the ones that ultimately, A, probably don't have a lot of time on their hands, but B, ultimately need someone that's going to help them craft a plan. And when variables come into this world, you obviously are going to help them execute.
Absolutely right. And the way we refer to them here in the practice is financial delegators. Yes, it's completely accurate. Could they work through this on their own? Sure. But the clients that we tend to work with, the clients that see the value in what we're doing, they're the ones that have determined, but I want my time for me, and I want to delegate with, experts what can be delegated. And so there's a real value there in partnering and building this team of advisors, as you mentioned, to free up their time so they can be actually doing the things they want to be doing.
Yeah, and I think that also extends to the people you've surrounded yourself with. I mean, I've gotten the pleasure of meeting some of the partners that you've surrounded yourself with, state attorneys, et cetera, CPAs. I think there's something to be said about that as well, Matt, right? The fact that you have taken the time to vet, you have taken the time to understand not just needs, but also offerings, but accountability as well on the other side with the people that you've chosen to partner with.
Totally right. Funny timing. I literally had a meeting this morning with a CPA that we're looking to introduce to our practice, and it's the same exact thing, Leo. I told him, as you're stating, the issue that we're running into in so many industries is that service is just so incredibly poor. And clients should not be excited simply because their phone call got returned or their email got responded to in a timely way. Like, the bar is so incredibly low. And for myself or you or some of these other strategic partners that we introduce our clients to, we have worked so hard to show them that we will care for them well. We will, be excellent in what we do and professional in what we do. And we all run a risk in making an introduction outside of our ecosystem. And so it's super important that you do that vetting and you work with like-minded people that way, because these are your clients, whether they're working with someone else or not, for a different piece of the solution. And that is why it is so important to have really excellent kind of partners in that space.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people obviously know that conceptually, right? But very few of them really understand that until things go south, right? Until things go belly up, until we miss certain deadlines, until we start to see perhaps things not being followed through on that were promised. So take us a little bit behind the scenes, right? How do you vet? What do you look for in partners like, the CPAs that you're surrounding yourself with, the state attorneys, et cetera? Like, what are you looking for on the other side with those partners, Matt?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think initially what goes a long way is what tends to go a long way with our clients. We're largely referral based. We're coming into client introductions or prospect introductions, I guess I should say, through clients. And so that's a huge piece of the vetting process. We're all vetting through some means, right? We all have a trust level already established with certain people in our lives. And when those people that we already trust are introducing us to other people that they trust, that really goes a long way. But once you've kind of met that first metric, the thing that I'd be looking for is looking at how do they do their business? What do they say is important to them about their business? Are they naturally bringing up some of these pain points of poor service or timely responses? Like, are they kind of speaking the language that we speak? What does their bench look like? What kind of staff do they have in place? Why is that enough or not enough? I asked them their assessment of their practice. And then on the end, right, there's a post vet as well, right? So after an introduction's been made, after a client is engaged, feedback is critical, and making sure that what the expectation was is what the delivery was. And so there's that feedback loop, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and I would say, also to that point, it's, one of my mentors always says, men of integrity don't always get it right, but they always make it right. Like,
that.
we're not always going to get things right, right? But man, like, how important is it, right, for whoever it is that you're partnering with, to make things right, right? Like, hey, things happen, right? Variables happen. But at the end of the day, like, if there's people on the other side that share similar values to what you've obviously built, that is obviously a common denominator in that relationship.
Certainly. Absolutely. And I love that quote. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, obviously, you and I have a relationship, a friendship first, right? But, at one point, I mean, we crossed that path, right? Like,
Yep.
So give the listeners a little bit of your experience, right? Like, what was it? There's a plethora of really amazing mortgage professionals that exist in this area and in this country.
Yep.
And we are honored to serve your clients in, on the liability side of the balance sheet as it relates to the mortgage, et cetera, refinance, purchases. And you have been one of our greatest advocate in that space. What was it about our process? What was it about our practice that, over time convinced you that we were the right party for you to partner with, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing obviously was there was that natural introduction, right? We came to know each other, right? And then yes, you're right. At some point, a decision needed to be made of, are we going to work together? Or is there going to be introductions being made? And for me, the first thing I think was intentionality. The way that you and your team operate, the vision that you have way down the road, was really encouraging to me, inspiring even. I mean, obviously, I'm always sitting in the seat of a business owner and an operator, and I know you are too. And I can just see the intentionality behind the team. And so that made that first, let's do this, easy. But what completely sealed it, and what kind of opened the floodgates to, I don't even know anymore, Leo, how many people have come your way. So many. But what opened the floodgates to that was the feedback. And that was critical to me. So my family has a background. My father particularly has a background in mortgage lending and title business. And so he's seen a huge amount of volume. And I believe he was one of the first ones I sent you, kind of as a case study, right? So I knew I'd get feedback from him. I knew he knew what the whole process was supposed to be like. And he never stopped talking about that process. It was such a validation, said it was the cleanest, most efficient process he'd ever seen. or ever been a part of. And I think that's just, I mean, that is what I'm looking for. I mean, that is the experience any business owner is looking for when they make an introduction, to a strategic partner in a space that they don't operate. That is absolutely, that was a home run.
Well, thank you for that, Matt. I appreciate that. And that's obviously by design. There's a great book that I love by this guy named Joey Coleman called Never Lose a Customer Again. And in his book, he talks about extensively about the cost to retain clients, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about marketing, top of the funnel. And listen, let's be honest to the listeners that are out there. There's a lot of great marketers in every single space that exists. Very few great business operators, very few people that lead with advice, right? But also very few people that understand this concept of LTV, lifetime value of a client, right? And so in his book, Joey talks about, hey, like the key is building a process that not only will get people in the door, right? There's been banks over the years in this entire nation that would give away toasters for you to open a free checking account with them, right? But 90 days later, right, the client would essentially close that account. Well, why? It wasn't because the offer at the beginning wasn't compelling enough. It was because of the process. It was because of the commitment to lifetime value of a client. And I've been around a lot of industries. Obviously, we do a good amount of business with financial advisors, but we also do a good amount of business with real estate professionals. And anybody that really touches the real estate transaction, we have a good handle on them.
Sure.
I would argue, though, that the really good operators, the incredible operators in your space, understand lifetime value of a client better than anyone else.
Yeah, you're spinning your wheels if all you're trying to do is transaction. I mean, if you're actually trying to solve problems, that client will most likely be around for their lifetime. And that makes you being able to focus on the parts of your business that you want to, the actual advising, the actual value pieces, not necessarily having to always be marketing. That just makes that happen. That just makes that easily make sense and come to be.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if we can simply just help and serve our clients as we would want to be served and put a process in place, but also like you discussed, have the right people around you, right? I mean, I'm a football guy, you're a baseball guy, right? Like having the right pitcher, the right shortstop, the right first baseman, third base, catch. I mean, all of those players play a massive role in this entire thing. And so talk a little bit about this within your industry. What would you say to an advisor that perhaps, I mean, it's tired of getting those phone calls from like mortgage professionals that are selling reverse mortgages, right? Like, I mean, that's great, but like there's much more to this. There is much more to simply just selling one product, in which honestly doesn't bring a lot of value to a lot of people, right? But man, partnering up with someone that has a process, partnering up with a financial advisor, an estate attorney that has a process, a CPA, that bench or that roster that you have, that's where the value really is.
Yeah, completely. People are looking for things in their life to be simplified, not to be dumbed down, right, or diluted. They want quality, but they want that to be as simple a path as possible. And so if you have a deep offering in your own right, partnered with other strategic partners in the spaces that they're going to encounter, and they have deep offerings as well, then that's a no-brainer. That is the model. That is exactly how to structure, as opposed to giving 15 introductions to try to accomplish a couple things.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. That's great stuff. Let's shift gears a little bit in light of some of those items that we brought up, and let's talk a little bit about this word, which I don't throw around that lightly, because I think a lot of people do. But this word is called stewardship, right? Like being a good steward. I would argue you embody that word better than anyone else I've ever met in your industry, because you really understand not only how to take care of your own personal finances, but also take care of those around you in the same way you would of your household. As people think about investing in real estate, as people think about planning, as people think about buying second homes, investment properties, within the lens of stewardship, give us some practical advice that people are probably missing, Matt, that are overlooking as they approach that concept of stewardship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times one of the things that we see that we can help kind of course correct for clients is, you know, the realities of where they're headed, right, as a family or whatever, as an individual investor, the realities of where they're headed get a little bit diluted by some of the realities of their current activity. And what I mean by that is, you know, you'll have an individual who's looking for investment, looking for real estate, looking for these things, and they want to do transactions because that's what they think they're supposed to do to kind of get where they're going. And where we can really help with them on that stewardship kind of perspective and lens is to make sure that they're considering stewardship of all the things, right? Stewardship of that relationship at home, stewardship of like doing what's best for the children long term. Like everything plays this, you know, plays into this role. And there's kind of two lenses that we always talk about, and I know I've shared these with you here in the practice. We have this ROI lens, right? This return on investment, and most people would look at stewardship through that ROI lens. And I would argue that might be the secondary lens that we look at stewardship through. The primary lens we like to look at stewardship through is ROL, which is return on life. And if the decisions that we're making today leave us with more money, but with less of the things that we truly desire in our heart for our family, for our life, then that is not a good stewardship decision. And we need to follow the ROL, return on life lens. And so that's really what guides me. That's who I am. I know that's who my wife is. You know, that's our desire. And so we here at the practice, we like to introduce that secondary lens to folks that may not think that way. And it's been a game changer. I mean, it is such a freeing way to move away from some of the pressures of what we feel we need to answer about money into what really serves us or our families with regard to money and financial decisions.
That's amazing. And I can speak firsthand. People talk about what they believe in, but very few people live it out. And I can definitively say that I've seen you live that out. You know, you haven't missed your kids' baseball games, lacrosse games,
Right,
soccer games. I mean, you guys do all kinds of stuff, all kinds of games, right? At one point, I think you were an Uber driver for them, taking them from place to place, right?
I just don't get paid. I'm an unpaid Uber driver.
Exactly. But to see how present you are, because stewardship has bled into probably the most important piece, the return on life component, is huge. You're right. I've learned that from you. That's a quote that I've used on a regular basis when giving people advice on, the liability side of the balance sheet, which is their mortgage.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, when we're no longer here, they're not going to remember us for all the money or all the funds that we accumulated, but the memories that we've obviously made with them.
Yeah, that's totally right. And I personally, my wife, I mentioned, Anna and I have a biblical worldview. And so as we look through resources and assets and things we've been blessed with, that is largely what guides us. And I have many clients that share that biblical worldview that we do, and many that don't. I recently finished my time in seminary. That was just something I felt strongly about doing. And my thesis was specifically on stewardship and about, utilizing the resources that we have available to us for the call or purpose that we have on our life. And that is really, where stewardship aligns, is understanding what you are about, what your family's about, what's truly important, and then aligning resources to facilitate that.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a great verse that says, in the multitude of counsel, there's wisdom, right?
Right.
In having people like you in their corner, in that counsel, has not only benefited, things, their portfolios, but have benefited obviously also on the concept of return on life.
Yeah, precisely.
Great stuff. Let's talk a little bit about tactically here. A lot of concerns, are being thrown around. And let's be honest, there's a lot of clickbait out there in the news, right?
Yep.
About, the real estate, the economy, et cetera. How do you navigate, fear, right?
Yep.
Because, at the end of the day, one of the things as you help people steward the future, steward their finance, steward their life, you're essentially mitigating risk by navigating what the tangible fears that a lot of individuals are struggling with, right?
Correct.
Maybe it's not enough in retirement. Maybe it's not enough insurance. Maybe it's concerns about, the future with family. So at its core, fear is a real thing that people struggle with in this area. And I think being a good steward really means preparing for that. So how do you navigate all of these fears about the economy, about housing prices, about inflation? There's so many variables, Matt. Can you give us some wisdom here to be able to navigate all of those items?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's an awesome question, and one I'm excited about, honestly, because I've been in this business for coming up on 26 years, and I didn't always used to do financial planning. I only started doing financial planning and pursuing my CFP designation after the 2008 market crash. And what I learned in that moment was, again, we live in a wildly successful area where there's really no shortage of money. There's a lot of people that have a lot of money. But what I came to quickly realize in 2008 was that if all you have is money and no clarity about whether or not it was enough or how much is enough or what you actually need, then all you have is this sense and this feeling of loss. That's all you have. And it's incredibly unsettling. And so when we address that potential problem with clients where the markets might pull back, or we might have a correction, or a real estate environment might soften, like you deal with, right? Or interest rates in real estate are swinging wildly or going in the wrong direction. The way we address those things with clients is we show them the thing that they're scared about ahead of time. And so in that financial planning process, we are already showing clients that this is what happens to your financial plan if markets correct 20%. Here's what it looks like if they correct 30%. And here's where that actually does or doesn't matter. Because if they don't know where they're going to land prior to something happening, then they will not be comfortable in that environment. And we can do the same, and we do model the same things with real estate. Look, here's the thing. If we're going to live here for the next decade, what does it matter if real estate prices and values drop a year after you buy that house? Were you buying that house through an ROI lens, or were you buying that house because it had that yard that you said was important to you for your child, or it's the neighborhood that you and your wife want to be in, right? So we help them work through some of these, as I mentioned at the beginning, some of these really weighty decisions by just giving them some clarity to help mute what seems loud but doesn't need to be loud. And that's been, I think, just super valuable, and clients have just run with that.
Wow, what a great nugget overall, because at the end of the day, to your point, fear is really just an acronym, and it stands for false evidences appearing real, right?
Oh, it's good. It's good.
But demystifying that fear is what you're talking about, right? Like, why are we afraid of certain things? Well, it's because we haven't really calculated or accounted for some of the variables that could happen. But if we can demystify, those concerns and say, okay, well, let's look at this holistically. Let's actually zoom in. Let's actually zoom out where we need to zoom out, and really look at these fears for what they are. That demystifies the actual concern. Now, granted, please note that there's obviously a lot of people that are struggling for various reasons in life.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I think if we just do a little bit more preparation, proper planning prevents poor performance, right? If we just do a little bit more preparation ahead of time and surround ourselves, like you discussed, with great advisors that are gonna give you advice based on your specific needs. I always talk about this concept of a bespoke process, right? Like, I mean, could you apply online, fill out the application, tell me a little bit about yourself. Of course, that's kind of part of the process. But at some point, this advice becomes bespoke. At some point, it's like, you know what? It's probably not a good time for you to do this. I think you need to save up more money and wait. Sometimes it's, you know what? It might be a good idea for you put a little bit less money down, less money down, and actually invest this, for your kids, your kids' college fund, as opposed to maybe put 25%. Let's look at maybe 20%, right? Like, it's a bespoke process. Once you obviously demystify and add a bespoke process to the equation, I think a lot of those fears start to diminish.
I think you're completely right. I think you're completely right. And I think there's some other things too that help that along the way. Like, we've gone through an environment right now where you've got a lot of clients, right, that have interest rates that start with a 2, and they're looking at that rate and they're like, that was amazing times. And you've got other that are looking at rates and they're like, man, I really hate that starts with a 7. But we're able to address some of those things again, even in the partnerships, like the program you have, where once they are on that loan, once they are part of your program, then those adjustments down as opportunities present themselves are automatic. They're going to happen. And I know there's folks out there that talk about that type of stuff, but we have experienced it firsthand with our clients, getting phone calls from your team as opportunities present themselves. So again, you're seeing situations and you're helping clients see them like, hey, yeah, maybe historically this isn't the ideal number that you want, or this isn't the number of yesterday, but it is workable. It's completely within the realm of reality for you. And if opportunities get better, your situation will get better because of the program and the team's intentionality. So I think those are things that help eliminate some of those fears too.
That's awesome, Matt. There's in closing here, there's a passion that I have, to align people and connect people with true professionals in this industry. In real estate, I always tell my clients, and I say, look, and I even say this to the financial advisors we work with, look, stop trying to vet the top professionals in that space. I know them. Tell me the area. Like, what are you thinking? Like Great Falls? Are you thinking McLean? You're thinking, what specifically are you looking for? Because it's important to work with the individuals that not just have the volume, but have a process and obviously have a practice that they can back. In the same way, I would say there's a plethora of financial advisors and financial planners out there. Everyone needs to work with whom they feel most comfortable, right? But maybe give me the top 3 questions that a person that is thinking about engaging, an advisor, right? Or perhaps, as they go into the new year, really reevaluating the type of advice they've been receiving. What are some of the questions that these clients should be asking the financial advisors that they're interviewing?
Yeah, I think I think the interviewing needs to happen at a point where they are already convinced they need an advisor, whether it's us or someone else. Sometimes I feel like the questioning is happening as a way of convincing themselves, and sometimes that's helpful, but a lot of times that's not. And then I think, in looking at some of these potential strategies that could be laid before them, or these processes that could be laid before them, there are a lot of individuals, I would say, in our industry that say they do financial planning. I would put our planning up against anybody in the area along that regard. So the first question would be, go deeper in that question. What do you mean by saying you guys do planning? Right? Understand what that is, because at the end of our process, if you don't have complete clarity on where you actually stand today and how far that is from where you're supposed to be based on the things that you've told us, then you did not just go through a planning process. There should be no lack of clarity between where you're at today and what it's going to take to get you where you want to be. The second thing I would ask is, we don't do tax preparation ourselves here, but we do tax planning with clients. That would be a key component. So much of the uphill work here is obviously saving money, but equally important is keeping as much of it as you can. And so inside our planning processes, we are doing forecasted lifetime tax. And that's a huge piece of the puzzle, is helping clients understand that it's not just about avoiding tax today. It is about how do you minimize lifetime tax over your lifetime, right? Have a much broader scope and a longer horizon that we're looking at. How is the strategy we're implementing today impacting your children's children? Those types of looks. And then third, I don't know if it's a question as much as a feel, honestly. I think that there's a lot of value in sitting across from somebody face to face and getting a sense for, and I always tell prospective clients this at the end of the meeting, We never ask for a decision from them at that meeting. I don't want anybody to make a decision on the spot. I want them to go home, sleep on it, pray about it if they're inclined to praying about things, and asking themselves, is this a relationship we could see ourselves in for the next decade and beyond? Do we feel comfortable? Are the personalities meshable, right? I think you should work with people you enjoy their company, and that's important to us, and that's why we've built such a great practice. We love the people we're working with, and it goes both ways. We want you to enjoy who we are, but we want to enjoy who you are as well. And so that's kind of the third weight, I'd say, not necessarily a question, but something we ask them to assess about us after they leave.
That's beautiful. Again, I promise I'm not getting paid to promote Joey Coleman's book, but it's definitely a good pickup to read. And in one of the chapters, Joey says, a lot of people talk about business as, as robots would, right? A B to C, a B to B. He goes, but you know what this really is? He says, it's A to H, human to human, right? I think what you're talking about here is like, look, as a human being, as an individual, sitting across the table from someone that you're looking to partner with long term really requires discernment, right? But at the end of the day, it really is just human to human. It really is, hey, do I see myself, being served by this individual in their practice for the next 10 years? If the answer of that is yes, then absolutely move forward. But if the answer is no, right, if there's any questions, maybe you need to take, a second look and reevaluate.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Well, Matt, this was such an incredible conversation, unbelievable. I feel like I could be here for another hour with you. But, for the listeners that are listening to this, what is the best way for people to connect with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I think our website is probably the easiest place to land. It's my last name, Buchanan, at buchananwealth.com. So they can just find us there online and reach out. We'd be pleased to have that introduction.
Matt, thank you again for your time. Thank you again for imparting this wisdom on us. And thank you again for your friendship.
Leo, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And thanks for the way you take care of our clients.